Thank you so much for the long introduction. But yeah, I always like to say I'm a designer first. So that means a lot. Being a designer means being an entrepreneur, creator, creating knowledge as well is part of that, right? Okay, fantastic. Shall I get into some initial bit of the presentation about CX, right? And thereafter, I would like to keep it very interactive. So you can ask any question. I have also opened a Miro board. So if I need to sketch out some flows, journeys or whatever, demonstrate that, I'll be more than happy to do that.
Okay.
Okay. So let's get into that. I will not keep it boring. It's very simple. I want to simplify concepts for you so that you grasp the concept of CX and how it's also related to the world of UX. So yeah, CX driven insights, essentially how can we use customer experience as a framework to look at insights as well as creating interesting products, innovative products for the market. And this is I call it think design way because there are certain things in this which we have developed on our own through our own experience. And uh, being a designer and also an academician, I also like to simplify things instead of making it look too big and too complicated. We will complicate at a later time. So, a very little bit of background about Think Design. We are a strategic design consultancy. We create digital experiences and we work with leadership teams of visionary organizations. So, essentially, we work with organizations, even if it's a one person organization, it's a company. And why I say why it's very important to us is an organization goal is different from an individual goal. I think as startup founders, we need to remember that also. Separate organization from individual. It's very, very important. So when we talk to people, their goals for organization, and there is always an intersecting part between the two. It's like you can visualize it like a Venn diagram, but they are two distinct things as well. And design thinking is at the core of our practices. And since 2004, we have been working in this domain. About roughly about 100 design professionals so far in our company, and currently based out of India and US with 5 studios: Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Denver in US. Now, because of COVID, it doesn't matter anymore what's your physical address of studio. But yeah, we can be reached across these. Last year, we got acquired by a company called Havas, which is one of the very large media and communication groups. Havas itself is present across 100 different countries and employs 10,000 uh, plus people across. So now we are part of the larger group called Havas Group. So that's in a nutshell. Uh, Customer experience, right? How do we define customer experience, and what is its role in the larger context of UX, right? So the way we see is it is a collective effect of multiple touch points. Touch points may sound complex, but I think it will be simplified as we go forward during a course of customers interaction. So it will be, if you take an end-to-end customer interaction with a business, right from the day they hear about you until the day they interact with you, purchase from you, and then maintain the relationship with you, all of that comes under the whole concept of customer experience. So for an airline, discovering a particular journey until you become a loyal customer and maintain loyalty points and actually utilize that, all those things come under customer experience. And the touch points are several. It could be your SMSs, it could be apps, it could be aggregators. Aggregators would be like makemytrip.com and all that, from them, or affiliate partners, to the way you experience an airline through a travel partner also becomes a part of customer experience. How well the travel partner is explaining to you about the airline also becomes important. And then physical touch points like the check-in counters, how baggage is being handled, and so on. So in the world of customer experience, it's full end-to-end journey of the user. And in that end-to-end journey, there are several user experience touch points. Okay, we can look at it like this as well. UX is a smaller component within customer experience. So actually, if you take customer experience, there'll be many user experience circles contained within that universe of customer experience. Whereas user experience deals with responses from user of a product, service, or a system, a particular product. because a user experience fundamentally, again, going to the basics, it's about the user. Customer may not be your user. Customer is also a non-user. Customer could be even somebody who is your competitor's user who is evaluating you. So that's where customer becomes a larger, it has a larger meaning than user experience. CX has a larger world than UX. Okay. And fundamentally, there are only three very important concerns, three important concepts you need to understand. That's all will be required to crack any customer experience challenge. And since we are talking about customer, we need to understand segmentation. How do you segment different customers? And it is different from persona, because persona is more qualitative. Segmentation means there are specific group of people for whom you may have specific solutions, or they may have specific challenges. So customer segmentation, the how well you can segment customers will tell you how much you understand about that customers. If you do not understand about customers well, you cannot segment them well. Then comes the concept of journeys, customer journeys. And in design world, we present it as maps, and hence we call it journey maps. But the journey of those customers, and if there are several customers, there will be different journeys of each of those customers. And the third one, and I always put this as part of it, because scenarios is one way we can look at it, but scenario stories, because the way we call user stories when you're doing product development, when you're creating something for customer experience, you work on scenario stories. So each scenario is a story, and storytelling way of creating products or services is a very new thing. We wouldn't have seen as much of this, say, before 5 years. Pre 2015, storytelling way, it was rather rare. Not everyone would understand. But today, when you talk about any kind of product development, you say user stories. User stories become fundamental to product development. Similarly, scenario stories will become fundamental to customer experience development. I have examples of each of this. So let's talk about customer segmentation first. There is a, across all this, there is an inherent implicit component. I didn't call that out because we all should understand that data becomes a very important part across all of this. Journey map, scenario stories, or customer segmentation. And it is so implicit. That's why I didn't even put it. We should go with the understanding that having a good understanding of data is very, very important, whether it's customer experience or user experience, but more so in the area of CX. Okay? And if you have good data, if you have access to customer data, then you can segment better. So let's say, for instance, this is an example of customer segment, and you're here, this is a persona, right? But it has some characters of segment for a financial services firm, right? Essentially, it's about getting in the shoes of a particular customer segment, so we may build products and services for them. Okay? So demographic characters like 35 years, it tells you certain things, and what is the kind of serviceable location. Do they come from tier 1 cities or tier 2 or both, and whether they are comfortable with online channels or not. But this captures some basic demographic details. But apart from that, what I suggest is that if you are detailing a particular segment, let us also look at qualitative and emotional aspects of the segment. So for instance, something like this, you can actually detail it out like this, right? This actually explains the world of this particular customer segment. Uh, Taking the persona route, we give a name and a picture, but if you don't, then essentially it becomes a particular customer segment, which is around uh, 35 years of age and salaried employees. And these are all the characters of that particular segment. There are many ways of doing it. Designers do it visually, but if you are not from the design world, you can actually capture the same thing even on an Excel sheet. The content is more important than style. What you capture and what are the, for instance, for a customer like this, what will be a dissuading factor? Why, what would be the reasons for them to hate you? Will be underpains, poor quality of services, or unmet commitments, and so on. For products which are already there, you can actually get access to data and actually create all these list of these items. based on your understanding of data from that customer. But for products that you are going to create, you will probably tap into market intelligence. You will understand from through various market intelligence platforms and understand what could be, and these will be more or less hypothesis. Okay. Going forward, there could be another way of simplifying this, even like this. Okay. So this also could be another way of looking at three different customer segments: Mr. Impatient segment, Mr. Value Seeker segment, and Mr. Mature segment. Right? And the kind of age groups, what is the literacy level, where are they located, and what is the kind of personality. Right? This is a quick and dirty segmentation for an online entertainment. I'm taking out example of our past work, just very specific snippets I'm taking out. Right? And this was actually for an existing product. So this data we got from the people in that company. When we sit across with stakeholders and have a workshop, they give out this information saying, we have these kind of people, and we brainstorm and create a huge list of different kinds of people, and finally create segments of those people. And why this is more valuable than merely demographic is, if I give you only the information of, if this is all I give you saying this is my customer, their age group is so and so, they live in certain place, and where are they located and what they are comfortable with, it doesn't give you enough insight into how do you create a product, what kind of feature you need to include in that product, right? This will not give you. Whereas this one, a little detailed information of that will definitely help you visualize what are the features of the product. It will help you visualize even the technical features, functional features also, as well as service, because customer experience, there is a huge component of customer service. So all these things about pains, all these elements in that can actually be tackled through customer service, not even by actually product creation. Similarly here, as you go forward, this one, if you're talking about someone who is a value seeker, who is married maybe, right, uh, then who is stable, they would probably look for deals. They would probably look at paying smaller amounts over extended periods than paying in lump sum. So then you can package your price point according to a particular segment. And if you are satisfying all three customer segments, you will have different ways of packaging your price point. So that was part one. And now how things start coming together is, once you create a customer segment, you start visualizing journey map of each of that segment, right? Essentially, you look at different actions, different steps that each customer takes to achieve their goals. Orientation towards goal is very important. What is the goal of the customer? When a customer comes to your particular product website, and they want to take a decision to sign up for your service. What is the goal of the customer? Is the goal of the customer signing up for service? No, that is not their goal. The goal of the customer is to really comprehensively understand your service, understand the price points, and actually get a picture of how this particular product or service is going to help them solve their problem. If you see that, if customer is able to see through that, then sign up happens. And hence, and I'll give you an example of how looking at it this way helps. There were times when, probably more than a decade ago, you would have to sign up mandatorily to experience a product. That was almost a given as a rule. But things changed. Like today now, cloud based applications, SaaS applications, and all of that, a lot of them you can experience many features without even clicking the button, clicking sign up. You will click on sign up once you have experienced a part of that particular product or service, right? And the thinking behind that is exactly this, that user is not motivated to sign up until they see through their problems being solved, right? And it will also help you, understand the customers better if they are using it even before signing up. It gives you a lot of very rich data. Okay, let me see. Okay, that's chat. Okay. I'll worry about chat later. So one second, let me go back. And once we create something like this in a rough way, now we use Miro board to create something like this. Then you try to connect all of them into different stages. Okay. If you're talking about loan application, you see that from the first stage until the end. Okay. And there is no end actually. If at some point it starts becoming an infinite loop, because once they are in the system, they keep going on and on, right? Need and purpose, enablers, they will be search, then they will land, then they will discover and evaluate. But between that and registering, they might need assistance, right? They might want to look at loan transfers, then there will be step-by-step application, verification, and so on. There will be several steps. And detailing out all these steps will help us understand from the customer point of view at each step what could be the kind of requirements and how can we help. A lot of times what we also do is when we chart these steps, if this is an existing application where there are so many steps and we say that, oh my god, I mean, why should customer go through so much of nonsense to just start using your application, then we actually, this also helps us reduce the number of steps when you document the current system. Okay. uh, there is detail of this, you can see this. So this is actually further more detail of that. If you look at enablers, if they're looking for a home loan, right, they would probably look at understand about your products and services from social media, from property portals, through developers, through brokers. Now, when you list this down, you can look at the amount of opportunities that open up. So if you want to, for example, if you are creating a new kind of loan product and you want to advertise that to your customers, potential customers, you have so many channels already listed here. You could go to brokers and tell them to talk about your products, or you can advertise in a property portal, right? Social media is a no-brainer, right? You can probably do referral through friends and so on. And generally what happens when we work on something like this is each of this is a question. There's a discussion on each of these items, because you need to, the idea of charting the customer journey is not to document whatever is currently there. It is also to come up with new ideas along the journey. And journey is a way of actually visualizing those ideas and contextualizing those ideas to different stages of customer. Then it becomes very easy to plan your product, also roadmap it. Say for instance, once you have all of this, we can say that, oh, there is a lot of effort going on until the user comes to registration. I don't have so much budget to take so many steps and do so much of activity. Let's park that aside. In my roadmap, the discovery stage, let us go light on that. Whereas let us focus on the product. I want to create an innovative product, and probably product will speak for itself. So you will focus from registration onwards, right? Whereas some people actually take the other route, saying that, oh, our product is good, let us focus only on the product journey, which is until the customer reaches our portal and starts signing up. And in some cases, you do end-to-end. Okay. And products that are mature actually actually spend a lot of time in each of the steps. In fact, for airlines, now nobody is taking flights much, but you would have noticed, if you recall, as soon as you take a trip on an airline, you would get an SMS from the carrier asking you for your experience, right? So what has happened is, in the last couple of years, the post travel feedback from user has become very important for the airline, so they capture that wasn't the trend before. Okay? So in fact, for example, if you are applying the same logic for loan, okay, after loan has been disbursed, okay, does a bank, does the bank care to ask you how was your process? How did you feel delighted in the entire loan process? They don't. I think they come to you next to pay EMI, and if you don't pay EMI, they send you threatening text messages, right? But if you care for customer journey, and if there are many competitors and you want to learn from the feelings of the customer, you will actually try and understand at each and every step of the way, how am I doing? And it actually becomes believe me, it actually becomes very, very important. In fact, if I take 5 different loan products from 5 different financial institutions and map these journeys and actually through research get an understanding of which of the journey is actually delightful for user, and generally speaking, none of these banks would have delight throughout. It's impossible to do that. At some stage point or the other there is a gap, right? But you will be able to compare and contrast. Some banks will have strength in customer acquisition. They may be very, very fast. They may actually come to your home, they will get all the papers, sit next to you, explain everything, and in few hours sign you up. Okay, whereas some banks may really suck at it. But going forward, some banks may actually make the entire process, their app experience, the way they communicate EMIs to you when you have to pay and all of that, may be much better than the other. So in a nutshell, what mapping customer journey, where it helps is you will be able to break down and conquer. Instead of saying that I want my customer journey to be delightful, you could actually say specifically where you can focus, where you want to focus on. And that point can actually be your secret sauce for success. Okay, so going forward, yeah, this is actually another example of a journey map. This was for a healthcare, in the healthcare domain, and we were doing this project to understand. And this was not a commercial customer experience. This was actually for a non-profit to mitigate certain challenges along care pathway in rural India. Okay. Now, customer journey map can also help you identify what are the areas where there is maximum problem. Right? If you are working on a tight budget, and again, a project can start by our client telling us that there is a problem we need to solve, but where is the problem and where can we intervene and solve it? That answers can come through a journey map. And also what happens is in systems like this, as well as banking systems or healthcare systems, there are a lot of compliances, there are a lot of regulatory issues. There are certain problems, if you try to open, it's a Pandora's box. You will be in an infinite loop of trying to solve that and never solve it. So this will also help you in picking the low-hanging fruit or the first problem to solve or the most critical problem to solve. It will help you in that also, breaking down. So this particular project did exactly that. In fact, in this, one of the things, just to give you an idea, this won several awards also for us. One of the interesting things that came up was that essentially the infant's parents, they get a prescription and they don't keep it. Okay, so the the way problem was stated was that uh, the parents are negligent, right? And the records are not there, so they are being given medication repeatedly, which is creating problems. Because and these parents also, in that particular region, or probably of that literacy, if the fever goes up, they panic and go to another doctor immediately, whoever is immediately available. So the medication is being repeated, powerful antibiotics and all that, and infant gets very, very weak, and sometimes leading to death as well. So how do we solve the problem of, and first of all, identifying that problem. We identified that it's not the negligence. The parents actually do not keep that prescription, and the reason why they don't keep the prescription is because what we found is, we did ethnographic research for that. What we found is that prescription does not look valuable, right? It does not look valuable enough to store, because it's some paper on which doctor has scribbled something and given to them. They don't find value in that. Okay, so one of the interventions we did is that we asked them to give a small kit, as in, because patients' records are kept over a period of time, we said give a parent a file with a nice fall leather padding and all that. It's like your filing cabinet, right? The bank papers, a bank paper is more valuable, right? It almost seems very formal. So the doctor writes the prescription, and the first time to the parent, they give it in that file. And and the parents after that keep the prescription because they think it's valuable. They go and take the entire file and put it in a almara. Okay, which actually changed the way. It's a very small design intervention, nothing systemic over there. We didn't address how whether doctors should write in neat handwriting, or should the prescription change, or should we educate parents. All of that would have taken several months and years to tackle. Instead, just add some value of the prescription. I mean, just packaged the prescription well. So like that, if you are able to chart the customer journey and break down that into small steps, you'll be able to identify challenges very easily and create solution intervention. And coming to scenario stories are somewhat related to customer journeys, but customer journeys is a structured way where you put one step after the other. But how scenario stories add value is like this. I'll show you an example. It's a storytelling way. So instead of actually charting customer journey in a very structured way, you will actually do it in an unstructured way. You visualize the story and actually sketch out. You don't have to be a great artist. This example, this image that you see on the right hand side, it was drawn by engineering students of IIT. So none of them are designers, but there's a lot of information you get when you sketch scenario stories. What does not come through Excel sheets or through worded documents comes when you sketch out, because it tells you props. It gives you, this is another, it's a much neater way of doing scenario story. This was trying to visualize IPTV. There was a time when IPTV was going to be popular. It never happened because internet took by storm, and internet broadband connections became faster, and you have Netflix of the world and all that. So IPTV is no more very popular. But this was trying to visualize what would be the benefit of a IPTV for a typical Indian middle class family. So what we did is we took this story, we created this story. It is like Tinkle. Tinkle has very good depiction of Indian middle class, a joint family. So trying to visualize a scenario. So what happens on a Sunday morning? They see some advertisement of Microsoft IPTV and so on, and they end up paying a utility bill on the screen. So we created several stories like this. This is just one slide. We created a deck of slides that showcases different benefits of IPTV, but those benefits in the story form, how it helps is actually this can inform how your interface in that IPTV would be, because you're switching from entertainment to utility bills to information to infotainment and games and so on. So how would be the user experience of that particular thing? But instead of directly jumping into screen design, you actually create stories of people. Because if you see, this is a scenario of a family, right? So when family is it's not individual entertainment anymore. When family is doing things together, how important remote control becomes on their furniture, right? It becomes a very important item. That was also another thing that is not in the context of screen, but out of that solution where we were focusing on. Similarly, this is another kind of scenario story for the same loan application I was telling you. We created scenario stories as well on how what would be trigger for a customer, and they would be calling a particular agent, and what would the agent do, right? So this scenario story tells you either the current situation or the future envisioned situation. But what it also importantly gives you is an understanding of props. Like though when you are ideating and when you're sketching, you'll come across very intuitively, you will start thinking of props. Okay, like in this case, for example, right? uh, there is a sofa which is shared by the family. There is a center table, there's a remote control, and uh, the people are wearing certain kinds of clothes, they're engaged in certain kinds of activities. So all of this becomes important in crafting a solution. Do not just think of something that is happening inside the confines of a particular screen, because that this is what the environment outside of that is what really helps in trying to create a solution which is very, very meaningful for the user. So yeah, finally, I mean, just 3 points. Customer experience is actually created through collaborative effort. So try and I think in the beginning I was talking about partners. It's important to have partners. Partners could mean your business partners, or it could mean your employees. It could mean even your investors. But important to work collaboratively, or even your mentors. It requires people, cross-functional teams, and people with different kinds of experiences. That diversity is required. Okay, and God lies always in the details. Like I said, if you take today e-commerce customer journey, you will go with the assumption of a particular customer journey. You will, because that you think that it's a best practice, but you start detailing it out and you will see the nuts and bolts of that, and then you see a scope of innovation. It is still even today possible. You may have 100 e-commerce companies, thousands of them. It's still possible to innovate a e-commerce venture which is delightful for the customers, right? And choose what works for you. The process is important, but outcome is more important. So quick and dirty is the way. So don't always try and make like we did for right this one and this one. Coming from a professional design agency, we do it like this. But even before we created these two, there are rough sketches that we make to very quickly ideate and discuss with the client, and this is a professional output. But when you do it for your own venture, you can actually do it in this form which I showed you before. It was I remember I was conducting an innovation workshop in Caribbean. It was for a group of companies. Like there's a large group of company. They produce from everything from beer to furniture to they're into housing and all that. Almost analogous to Reliance Group here. So they were there and they were talking about some kind of a solution to help workers come to their factories. Okay. So I asked the participants. So then they were thinking of some kind of app-based solution, so that app can track where they are and all that. So I said, don't do that. Let us do scenario stories. Okay? Let's sketch this out. We spent half an hour. All the participants sketched, and the kind of things that came, they never thought about when they were thinking of this solution. So they were thinking more of a tracking solution to track whether where they are, so that they come on time. But when they did this, the entire perspective changed, because in one of the sketches, what happened is they sketched dogs. They sketched dogs running behind the worker. So then we probed into that and we asked, why did you sketch dogs? So that he was saying that to reach our factory, they need to leave their homes sometimes at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning. And during that time, and in that region, there are dogs which are very aggressive. So oftentimes the workers are scared of dogs and they get bitten by dogs. Okay. Now you think, now when you come to that kind of a empathy, right? Then you look at a solution very differently. How do you solve the problem of workers coming on time? Maybe an app-based tracking solution is not the only answer, right? Maybe you have to think of some other solution. How they solve uh, that problem of dogs biting workers is a different matter. But by creating stories like this, you will be able to at least come to the point where you are empathizing and looking at the larger context, than just saying that we will track them and things will all be solved by themselves. Okay. So yeah, so that's the end of this presentation. I thought, how long is it? It's half an hour. Yeah. Wow. It's 40 minutes. Okay. I bored you enough. I'll take questions. I'll make it interactive from here on.
Yeah, so we already have a lot of questions coming
Oh
from the
yes,
participants.
there are. Yeah.
So I will just start with a few of them. Um, the first question that we have is, what are the key factors to keep in mind that can help us understand the customer psyche better and give a better customer experience? This is mainly related to how to get a better market validation done while doing the customer research interviews.
While doing customer research interviews,
Yeah.
how to do market validation.
Yeah, so mainly to understand customer psyche.
Okay.
How can
Customer
you?
psyche, as in you, there are many ways of doing it. One is actually taking a data route. If you have an existing product, there's a lot of material on behavior data. Even on ThinkDesign website, I have written some articles on behavior data. That is one route that is more or less easier. Easier as in not easier to implement, but at least easier to understand, because the fundamental of behavior analytics, what it says is that every user action is related to some kind of a behavior motivation. If you are able to relate the two, you can actually tell what the customer is going to do. Okay. Prediction apart, you can relate user action to user behavior. So that's not very hard. For example, I'll give you an example. If if I have, if I'm doing eye tracking of a user, okay, and if I have a banner with 4 images, all 4 of them conveying the same message, but there are 4 distinct images, I will be able to track which particular image caught the customer's eye. So user action is user is pausing and looking deeper in that image, and then based on that I can correlate and create behavior. Otherwise, if you do not have data, if you're creating something new, if you're creating something out of scratch, from the scratch and new, then you of course rely on primary research. You will first create some kind of a hypothesized clusters of users, and then you talk to them. You actually ask behavior related questions, and based on the responses you will understand. To give you an example, like today in this lockdown scenario, we were talking to some financial services company, and one of the question was, what is the meaning of money? Okay. Now, what is the meaning of money is actually a kind of user perception, right? So you go out to the users and actually inquire about it. And there are several ways you can break that down into questions. For example, if I were to do it, probably I will say, I will put 2 things and I ask customer to rate. I'll tell them in one statement, I will say that uh, money is not very important anymore. Strongly agree to strongly disagree, right? Money is the root cause of happiness and well-being and health, right? And again, strongly agree to disagree. So we will get some kind of an idea of what their psyche is. So meaning of money, how does it help? If people see money as something that gives health and wealth, you can actually draw a lot of visual cues from that in financial services application. Okay. uh, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think you have covered every point which the person is trying to ask, and I'm glad you covered it. It has also covered up a lot of questions
Okay.
which are coming up. Then the next question is it better to do brainstorming with a team of peers or with somebody with previous experience in the field?
Hmm. Okay, brainstorming fundamentally, that's actually a very good question. Fundamentally, brainstorming is a exercise that has to give you a breadth of ideas. They may not at all be related to each other, because brainstorming is successful when you have many ideas. So sometimes what happens is those who know very well about a particular field or domain will have fewer ideas than those who don't know. It's very ironical, but it's true. So it is okay to have experienced people advise you, coach you, or probably once you expand, you also contracted. You would have heard about Double Diamond, that design thinking process. Now you want to shoot down some ideas saying that they are not practical. Probably you can actually get experienced folks. They can come and ask, how are you going to achieve it? Okay, how will you even do that? Right? uh, it will always of course it's also useful to have experienced people in the group to moderate sessions, but do not expect people who have deep expertise in a particular domain to come up with many distinct ideas. That's going to be hard.
Do we also ask users or customers to create a scenario stories to gain more useful insight into customer experience? Yeah.
uh, in fact, it's very helpful to do that. Sometimes they may not be able to create a future scenario story, but if you actually ask customers to create their their current story and how it's very, very useful. A lot of people do that. We also do that quite a lot when language is a barrier or whatever. But even otherwise, uh, asking customer to co-create with you either scenario stories or giving them props, okay, that will help you learn a lot about those customers. Yes.
Okay. Then the next question that we have is, how do you approach clients and tell them they need your services?
How do you approach client and how do you sell yourself to client? Wow,
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
very broad question. How do you sell yourself to a client? And it's the same is true for even if it's a product, startup product. How do you convey the value? How do you communicate the value, right? uh, what I would suggest is, it's going to be very long complicated answer. In fact, there are two books. There is Business Model Canvas, and the same author also wrote Value Proposition. They are actually, you can say, there is one is prequel of the other, right? If you understand value proposition, selling is not going to be hard. Okay, read that book. They're very, very valuable.
Then the next question that we have is, how to decide for whom to make a quick and dirty story and for whom to make an illustrative design.
Illustrative design is just a packaging. It's not necessary to make illustrative very well illustrative design at all. But when you have to package for customer, and if customer asks, or if there are senior executives who want to see all the details and in a certain way, that is when we tend to package it and do it very neatly. But uh, quick and dirty is always a starting point. So regardless of how well you are packaging, you will anyway do quick and dirty. So quick and dirty always packaging a scenario story, refrain from it as much as possible. It's not necessary in design. No, the field of creation, not just design, even in coding or any of this field of creating something, right? You create something this small, right? But you waste so much. Waste as in ideas. You reject, right? So all the things in your process are disposables. Don't try to spend needless hours on it trying to make them visually neat. Okay, you must move to the next stage. Create, learn, improve. Create, learn, improve, right? That progression from one stage to another should be as quick as possible. So trying to be insanely worried about how good it looks will slow you down.
Then the next question that we have is, if you had to start Think Design in 2020, what would your first steps be?
If I were to start Think Design in 2020, what would my first step be? I'll tell you how I started in 2004. In 2004, and that's something I would not do in 2020 because clients will not accept it. In 2004, I started, but I was one individual when I started. Then quickly I had two other partners, but nobody knew that we existed. Okay, we didn't even have a website. So what we did is we picked up our phone, called customers, and said, "This is what we do, and can we come and meet you?" And customers were welcome, clients were welcome. During that time, there were not so many telemarketers, and people would not get irritated. Today, if I have to talk to my brother, I text him, "Can I speak to you?" Right? So there is a difference. There is a huge difference in the world. So nobody would appreciate that. So I think the first thing that I would do is actually create a very good website. Think of my model. I mean, all that goes unsaid. You have to think of a business model and value proposition, but have an online presence and find ways of putting our product or a service in front of the customer. That's the very first thing we need to do. Online presence is extremely, extremely important.
Okay. And then the next question that we have is, uh, as a researcher, how can you help solving the problems related to mental health during COVID-19 pandemic?
How can we help solve? Oh wow, this is in fact,
Yeah.
in our latest cohort, one student actually worked on that topic. Okay, just give me a minute. If I'm able to search, they have actually created. The student has created. Actually, two or three students. They created research methods that can be used to understand mental health issues. Okay, and that students work, and that is free to be shared here. I will share that. Just give me 2 minutes.
Okay, then I think that was actually a very direct question that we have. We have a few more questions related to pandemic also.
Hmm.
I will go through them a bit later.
Yeah.
Then can you suggest a few data science websites that can help me with my secondary research better, or
Yes.
some tools?
I will go to that first. If I forget sharing that students work on mental health, just remind me. So this data science, it's all interesting. You want to talk about collecting data from secondary sources, also collecting some kind of intelligence from open sources. Let me share that a little. Tell me if when you're able to see my screen.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, this is one website. It requires a subscription. The ones that have good content, or good content as in a lot of deeper insights and intelligence, they are not free. So you have to go through this and subscribe. Okay, this one actually gives you topics. Quid will help you when you search text string. What they say is turn text into context, right? When you search a text string, it will give you all the connections and topics. It will help you draw connections between several things. So, for instance, an example here is wellness and CES and smart home security. How different things are connected with each other. Because that's what we are looking for, correlation of dissimilar things,
Okay.
right? This is one good source. The second good source is SimilarWeb. SimilarWeb, in fact, I had opened this for you to present to you. It gives you comparative ranking of different sites. Okay, you have seen, you know about Udemy, right? Now, if you take Udemy, and I'm using a free version right now, so this is something available without even a subscription module. Subscribing to it. Okay, it shows global rank went down. Uh, I would have thought global rank, I would have assumed that it would have gone up, whereas it didn't during pandemic, right? So this gives you certain facts. Even in the country, the rank went down, so somebody else is gaining at their cost. And it gives you all the secondary data of visits and average duration, which is all good. Pages per visit is 6.73. Not very important, but their geographic spread is also interesting. 19.5% from India, and next to that is United States. Now I want to compare this with, say, Coursera, right? So Coursera is gaining. So somebody else is gaining. They may be gaining at Udemy's cost or someone else's cost, but Coursera is gaining, and their country rank went up. Coursera still ranks 10 against 5 of Udemy in category, but looking at the way they are gaining, possibly they may overtake if Udemy does not do much about it. Okay. This kind of thing, similar web gives you some understanding. You can also compare apps. Again, if you have a paid subscription, it will give you many more details of that. You can also see how much of them are coming from direct to referrals. Wherever there is contrast, you can see that in social there is a huge contrast. There is a difference of 2%. Okay. So Udemy has 7.84 traffic source of. So Udemy is doing better than Coursera on the front, on the social front, and so on. So if you get subscription, you can get much more deeper insights. Okay. There is this one, this site you could go to. Again, this needs a subscription. Uh, you can purchase this. Essentially, this gives you uh, an understanding of totally about 8,000 solutions available in the entire marketing technology space. Okay, including your data and analytics, social relationships, content, experience, and all of that. Okay, it might be worth the while. I think you don't need to subscribe. You don't need to pay. You just have to leave your details, and they'll send you this. From what I know. Okay. Google Trends is a very good source. Okay. Since we talked about mental health also, I will show you something interesting. Because I was also interested, because Sushant Singh Rajput is no more, unfortunately. A lot of discussion is going on, or was going on, around mental health. So I wanted to know, is mental health a trend? Will it stay? And how does it relate to other issues currently? And hopefully I will open your eyes. This is 12 months data. This is and I'm seeing United States, so let me change it to India. So the interest is very, very sporadic. It is not like very predictable. Let's take it, for instance, past 30 days, you might see some kind of a spike here. Okay, but then it came down. So essentially, it's triggered by some event. Uh, I'll see last something happened in October that last year that this spike went up again. Does anyone remember what happened in October? It must have been some well-known person would have committed suicide. I don't know. That could have been the trigger because you see a very similar behavior during this period here. Okay, but it is coming back. I mean, you see September 29th over here, whatever trend was there, the point, the density is the same even after. It hasn't even like sustained some kind of an interest over period as compared to uh, now during COVID, people will probably be interested in immunity as a search term. Now you see, immunity was nothing before. It suddenly went up, and it is sustaining. But I do not know whether this will sustain because once there is a treatment to COVID, I think people will not worry about immunity anymore. Okay, I can take tablet because always people, the general tendency is that uh, you don't take vitamins. You'd like to take painkillers. When there is a pain, I will take painkiller. Who is going to take vitamins throughout the life? Anything else you want to compare during this time? Okay, I want to search uh, entertainment because entertainment also has changed the landscape. Okay, that somewhere instead of entertainment, let us search for because entertainment is an industry term. From a user point of view, what it will be? Movies. Yeah, movies is a sudden spike again. This is definitely COVID, somewhere around March 15th to 21. Okay, it went up and it's coming back again, going up. Somewhere this will also probably flatten, similar to before. Actually, unfortunately, what was in October, uh, we haven't still reached that post this lockdown. Okay. But anyway, what does it give? It gives a lot of hypothesis on these subjects. We don't usually compare mental health with immunity to movies. I'm just trying to show that how whether certain trends are going to stay or they are going to go up just as spike and then come back to normal, and sometimes they come back and they actually reach rock bottom as well. Sensex. If people are searching more about Sensex, that's also true. Okay, so yeah, I hope I was able to answer some of your queries. Secondary sources of data, there is plenty. You can have open source intelligence, you can go to social network platforms and search trending hashtags. The idea is that there will not be a single source of truth. That is very hard to find. You need to correlate different things, and platforms like this, Fit for instance, help in that. And there are many more correlation platforms. That's why if you go here and you see if there are any free to use, you can probe that and understand. If there are platforms that are offering even correlation for free, they will have something else, some other hidden thing inside through which they'll make money. Okay, so I'll stop sharing now. And how do I stop? Yeah, stop sharing.
I think thank you so much. Like there are a lot of tools that I'm pretty sure all of us could store and use it for research. And the way you showed about the Google Trends, I think it has opened up a lot of our mental models as well.
Yeah.
To see how to believe in something and not to believe in something.
Hmm.
Then one of the next questions that we have is how do you put forward the story of an app-based service? For example, Flipkart. Which strategy will you suggest and why?
Okay. How do you? Sorry, can you repeat that for me?
How do you put forward the story of an app-based service? For example,
Mhm.
Flipkart. Which
Uh-huh.
strategy will you suggest and why?
Which strategy will you suggest for what? For improving
For an
Flipkart or
app-based for an app-based
for
service.
any app-based
Yeah.
service, right? Even so, if you take Flipkart is more of a e-commerce. You would not exactly call it app-based service because there are delivery people who are coming and delivering to you. There is an app for delivery people management as well, but that's more of an enterprise level app, right? Uh, a pure app-based service would be uh, there are some. There was a time when I used to use a lot of fitness apps where, the coach would come and teach you. You never meet the coach. You never meet the trainer. You switch on your app, the video is on, and they will tell you, how to work out. Okay, that would be a pure app-based service. Education, online education would be a pure app-based. If it's only online, if it's pure app-based service. So what would be your Book My Show? Yes, Book My Show, Vedant will not be pure app-based, because Book My Show, they have a lot of on-the-ground personnel. They manage events, Book My Show people, right? They do on-the-ground work as well. Netflix will be an app-based service. Unacademy will be an app-based service, correct? Any of them, any of this, Unacademy or Netflix, okay? Now, when you say Byju's, also, yes, correct. So there is pre-acquisition. If you very abstractly look at from 30,000 foot level, you will have uh, pre-acquisition, during acquisition, and post-acquisition. Pre-acquisition, during usage, post-usage. Those are look at it as three buckets. So pre-acquisition means they are discovering you, they are trying to taste you, they want to know your pricing, how good your service, your credibility, and all of that comes in pre-acquisition. And during usage, you will have whether the customer is delighted using your product, whether they have challenges using the product, uh, how much of the problem it is solving for you, how easy it is for use, all of that. And post usage will be whether the exit is smooth, or whether the feedback loop is carried forward, whether you are able to retain customer, or after they have left you, whether you are able to pull them back. So if you look at these three, and there are plenty of channels, plenty of ways you can handle within each of these buckets. Pre-acquisition, your marketing platforms, the way you create a product as well. See, I gave you an example of SimilarWeb, right? I shared that screen where it is showing some data free of cost, and I am not even an acquired customer. Okay, but once I click the button, I become a subscribed customer, and then I'll be able to use the product more. So that's a strategy for you to attract customers. Instead of saying that unless you quit example, if you see, unless I subscribe, I can't say anything, but that's a specialized service. But SimilarWeb is an example where they're attracting the customer to almost to the final step. They're giving you the whole taste of it and then saying, now you subscribe. Once after I subscribe, they will send me, they will do cross-selling and upselling. They'll sell you more plans for some higher prices, some freemium plans, and so on. And the life over there of the customer, it's a captive customer. You can do plenty of stuff with the customer. You can create augmented products. If you understand the customers enough, you can create some specialized offers for them, solutions for them. Yeah.
Okay, and the next question that we have is how to approach if there are multiple stakeholders involved. For example, when we tried to sell educational products to school, we had to sell it to the owner than to the admits.
Hmm. How do
So
you
how
have
do you approach when there are multiple stakeholders involved?
we are talking about multiple stakeholders with conflicting interest,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that is an interesting challenge. In fact, I personally like those kind of challenges where there is complexity, because there's a lot to design over there. There's a lot to shape up. There's ambiguity. Okay, if believe me, if all stakeholders are perfectly aligned, it's going to be extremely boring. There won't be much of a problem to solve, or the solution will be very, very predictable. The innovation actually comes when people have, and it's nature actually, right? This world was born out of Big Bang. When things clash, creation happens, right? When things align, we have an eclipse. So so that's, don't hope for alignment, perfect alignment. Let things clash. There'll be fun in that, and lot of new ideas come. In fact, that's with a lot of projects that we do. That's why you say, right, organization, right? Organization itself is a conflict of thought between the leader who has their own motivation, versus there is a team and there is a company which has to stand by itself, and there will be inherent conflict. Now once you have multiple stakeholders, within the organization or multiple stakeholders even as customers. The example that you gave is, let's say if you take a school, you have teachers, you have management of the school, and you have students and parents, and each of them want their own piece out of it, right? But it's an interesting problem to solve.
Okay, I think I know the example you gave about the Big Bang and the eclipse. And then the next question that we have is, there used to be apps like Jigno and Rapido for providing services for booking auto and bike respectively. But they didn't show such an impact to the customer as other top services. What may have gone wrong regardless of being innovative at that time?
Huh. I don't know. It's very I didn't study their model. I don't know. I haven't done a post-mortem of that. But I think your question itself has an answer. There is probably a value communication challenge, or sometimes there is also a huge challenge in understanding the customer lifetime value. A lot of startups they make mistake in that, in understanding the lifetime value. So lifetime value is essentially one of the metrics that how much is the value of one customer, how much money that one customer pays to your company. Okay, in say for example car companies, right? Car companies, they, for the most part, it doesn't make sense for them to create a e-commerce portal, because generally speaking, the lifetime value of a customer for a car is not that much, because you don't keep buying car every day. Okay, frequency of going there also is very less, and more often than not, you switch brands, you upgrade. As you upgrade, you switch brand. Okay, so a lot of times people get that particular thing wrong: the frequency of usage and the lifetime value, and that's where things fail. So that's why what people also try and do is create cross-selling and upselling opportunities. Just like Uber, what happens with Uber is the most that you can do with Uber is 2 trips a day. Okay, the reality is that sometimes you don't even do that, but the maximum you will do as a customer is 2 trips a day. So Uber wants more Uber in your home, so they say, okay, take food also from us, right? It's a cross-selling. They have used existing infrastructure so that you use more of Uber and increase lifetime value. So I'm not necessarily suggesting you need to go the Uber route, but if you have a kind of product which is not adding value through the day for you, or every day for you, if you don't wake up every day and there is no motivation for a customer to use the app, you probably have to think of services that customer needs like that. Or if lifetime value is lower, then the ticket price should be higher. That means you pay higher ticket each time you buy. Flipkart, for instance, you can buy anything from electronics to handkerchiefs to all of that. And from what I heard from the entrepreneurs I know, that Flipkart is quite popular for high ticket items. I don't know why. I don't know the reason behind it, but that means electronics like televisions and refrigerators, people buy a lot on Flipkart compared with other e-commerce platforms. So they are doing something right over there. Maybe the way they handle high ticket customers is better, or I don't know what they are doing right. Maybe the way they are showcasing that is good. There are a lot of learnings from that. Okay, somebody is asking, recently Uber Eats collapsed. Can you put your views on it? Have they failed to understand Indian context? Is that the latest question? Sorry, did I read too fast? Did I go down too fast?
No, we have a few more questions. So, Baka, can you repeat once then?
Yeah, I can answer this.
Okay, yeah, please do.
Uber Eats collapsed. Can you put your views on it? Uh, have they failed to understand Indian context? I don't know if they fail to understand Indian context as in what? Do you mean economics? If they have, possibly they fail to understand. I'm not an expert to comment on their model. Um, but the fact that they sold it off, I think they sold it off, right, to Zomato or something, right? They were not doing well. Uh, Sometimes even the biggest of multinationals do not get uh, the unit economics, right? The unit economics, right, as in how much will they earn per transaction. If you don't get that, and if you have very high volume of transactions, you will collapse. So one thing that you can take away from this is try and get your unit economics right. Every transaction has to have some kind of a value for you, whether you are creating a platform or a product. If you get that equation right, you will be able to sustain for a longer period.
I think
Yeah, Disha, you can probably.
acquisition strategy. I mean, the strategy that Uber Eats used was actually to make a lot of losses and acquire customers. That's what Uber was also doing. They were trying to get as many customers through providing incentives, coupons, and a lot of offers. So they weren't really making a lot
Yeah.
of money because they had a lot of tax to pay as well. So I think they failed in terms of
Hmm.
covering their costs, and so that's right. I mean, they had a huge customer base because of the kind of pricing that they gave to us, and followed by that, they
Hmm.
also had Zomato Gold offer also for 3 months after they got themselves acquired.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that
Correct.
happened.
Yeah.
So the next question we have is, what were your top three challenges trying to scale up the Think Design team?
Yeah, we are in consulting, so our challenges will be very different from a product company. Okay, for a company which is into consulting and that too into professional services, which means specialized knowledge, right? The biggest challenge in general would be actually to get I'll tell you, the first challenge would be to get your first employee right. Okay, because you will be owner or partners, then getting the first employee, professionally recognizing their talent, and also accepting and respecting the differences. Okay, nobody will be like you, and in fact it is foolish to expect somebody to be like you. They should be different from you, and that it is the difference that creates some magic, right? So once you have gone through that phase and you acquire a critical mass, then comes a different challenge, which is expansion across our we are spread across 5 different studios. So the unique challenge that we had was every time we expanded to a studio, it would be okay, leadership in that particular area, and then acquiring customers in that particular area, because it then becomes a little more uh, market oriented. We are not a local business, but the market around that should value you. Otherwise, there is no reason for you. To me, if I have a studio in Bangalore and I'm not working with in Bangalore and I'm not working with customers in Bangalore, it doesn't make sense to have a studio there. So understanding the context of that particular region, and India is so diverse. India has many markets within India. So that was another level of challenge. And further down the line, towards our maturity phase, we had challenge in terms of diversification, because primarily we have been designers for a very long time, but we were hitting a wall when we did not have developers along with us in our team, right? And all the founders are designers. So to diversify into development, which is a natural step after UX, right? To identify the talent, attract the talent, and also to motivate them and give them direction, that's another challenge. So these were the three challenges, but somehow towards that, in the period of 15 years, we also became mature. So uh, and we the end of the day, uh, at every step you learn and move forward. Every failure is a learning. So that's the way we look at it.
I mean, that's really good. I think Disha is having some connection issues, so I'm taking over the questions for now.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So another question we have is really common. It's a really common one. So it says that how much research is enough?
Hmm. Yeah. This is actually this is the first slide, first presentation I give to all the the cohorts that I'm running. So I always give the example of the Dunning-Kruger curve, and you should be in the middle. So when you speaking in a very abstract sense, uh, when you know what you know and when you know what you also don't know, that is good enough to start doing something, right? when you do not know what you don't know, it's dangerous to start something, because then your confidence is so high, because you don't even know the world out there, right? But what happens when you know everything is, it leads, according to me, it leads to abyss. There is nothing left. So you don't create anything, because you go into the depth of something, you will feel that what else is there. So you should be somewhere in that mid path. When you are in the business of creating something, you should have enough understanding of what you know and also what you don't know, because you can reject things that I don't need to know. That much awareness. Like, there are things that I do not know, I don't intend to know, I won't venture into that area, right? So that equilibrium you need to get into.
I think even figuring out that midpoint is so difficult sometimes. You don't know if you're towards the other side or you're towards the beginning side. So it
Yeah,
gets really confusing. Even when we research nowadays in colleges and institutes,
yeah,
it's really difficult to stop at one point.
yes,
But
yes.
that gives a good explanation what you gave us right now.
Yeah, you can uh, there is a good way of testing that. You can try to start making, and take the take criticism, because if you start creating something without knowing much, it will show in your creation, and you will not be able to answer questions that people ask. That's the reason why fundamentally prototyping is also a research process, right?
Right.
You try to do something and then test it out, but that also means you should be open to take criticism and say, if it doesn't work, trash it and do something,
Right.
improve it.
Right. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Definitely. The next question we have is, in the current scenario where users are not comfortable with giving personal details while onboarding, how can we improvise the experience?
Improvise the experience for the user, you mean? Because if user does not want to give details and you don't take details, it is already a good experience for the user. I think we want user details for in our interest. uh, if user is not ready to give personal details, and let's say if the question was, if user is not ready to give personal details and I still want to capture personal details,
Hmm.
it's a design problem. You can solve that problem. You can ask in a very interesting way. And digital design is no different from your real life. Imagine you are in a train or in a flight, and you have 3-4 hours to kill, and you need to talk to the guy next to you. He is not wanting to talk. How do you persuade him to talk? It's the same thing you are trying to do on the screen. You need to persuade user to give those details, right? And you can't do that. We did that. There was a long time back, we worked on a dating application where users were to give, unless user gives all the details, there were some 32 different parameters. Unless they give all the details, they cannot be matched. Okay. But asking user to fill 32 fields in the form before they onboard on the platform, that didn't make sense. But at the same time, if I match somebody and says that this is your match without taking 32 details, that is also bad user experience. So what we did is we captured those details visually. So when we were asking what is your music taste, that there was one question in one screen. That one question was, what are your favorite genres, right? And each genre was created into a very interesting iconograph with its own interaction and all that. So people felt engaged and they selected that. So instead of giving 32 fields and give drop downs and say, oh, I select a genre and then there's a drop down, that will be boring and it will seem transactional to the user. If you make it playful, they will do it. So you could try that also.
Yeah, I think that answers the question. And the next question we have is, during this pandemic, it's really difficult to use some of the research tools that are done on field, something like observation, empathy mapping. How do we use these tools, online as substitutes?
We are doing it. In fact, yesterday only I was if we win that project, it's a massive global level research project where we need to actually, we started working on the proposal in February, okay, when there was no pandemic. So we said that we will do ethnographic research. It was about improving the workflow of people, and to improve the workflow we need to go and sit with them. We propose that we'll sit in your offices and observe users. It's a publishing workflow, right? Publishing workflow will not take less than an hour. Sometimes it stretches into days. So now what we are doing is, the plan that we are doing is that we are going to send equipment to users. Okay, so to respect their privacy, instead of having like a Zoom call like this, we will have a device with camera, okay, which is next to them, and they'll be working. So that device will be recording. It will be recording continuously for 5-6 days as they're performing tasks, and at the same time, through the device only, we will be communicating to the user and asking questions. Why you are performing this task? Are there any challenges, and so on. So why this physical device respects people privacy is, if they don't want, they can just turn it around. Whereas Zoom, sometimes you can forget that it's on, and it can become very embarrassing. Okay? So this is one way. There are online tools, online research tools also to collect data. But most of them essentially what? You have to be, instead of physical presence, you're talking about being telepresent. You can do that using tools, digital tools.
Definitely. The next question we have is, how do you compare yourself being a better competitor with other organizations providing design solutions like Desmania or anyone else?
Some organizations, there are a lot of businesses which may be doing at a surface level the same thing. But like I said, if you take a customer journey and see what customers go through, the devil is actually in the details. So Desmania, in fact, my partner, who is co-founder of Think Design, also worked at Desmania at one time, right? Desmania and we do very different work. Desmania is into industrial design, whereas we are totally into digital design. But generally speaking, Think Design, first of all, when we have to pitch ourselves to client, the first thing that we say is that we have 1.5 decade of experience. 1.5 decade means we have seen 4 generations of digital revolution, 4 full generations. We have seen from .com to the entire thing of UI, which was all based on desktop, Windows UI, desktop Windows UI and embedded applications, to the first generation of multi-device mobile applications where there were 5 operating systems. Now I don't think anyone even remembers them. There was Android, iOS, Microsoft, BlackBerry, and one more. Uh, it starts with S. Which one was Nokia? Nokia was Symbian. 5 smartphone operating systems. We have been through all of these generations, so we have a lot of learning and experience. And finally, if you are compared with the newer firms that are coming, they are doing good work. They have good capabilities, but we work as strategic partners, not just as design solution providers. So we actually visualize the entire business challenge and create solutions along the way of addressing those business challenges. We are not just creating screens and icons and micro animations. Those also happen, but they happen somewhere very far down the line. What comes actually first is a deeper understanding. Sometimes we don't even let the pen hit the paper until we have an understanding of what is it that we are trying to solve. Right? So that is what we come with. That would be one of the key differentiators for us.
That's amazing. Seeing 4 generations all together is really cool. And I mean, I don't know why BlackBerry crashed, but it was a trend in the middle. It was a really big trend. I think every one of us, most of us had Blackberries over here. But
yeah. I also used BlackBerry. According to me, my point of departure from BlackBerry was their BlackBerry Storm. That was a horrible, horrible phone. BlackBerry Storm had one screen with 4 springs under that. Okay, so they tried to create a physical and virtual experience in one. So instead of just touching the keys, you would click on a virtual key, but press the entire screen. Okay, it used to give me thumb ache.
Right. I remember that.
That was departure. That's when I thought that, okay, I'm not good. This is what happens. You screw users' experience on one problem you create for them, they'll just go away because you have an alternative.
Very true, very true. The next question we have is, can you explain the concept or the principle of synergy? Whole is greater than the sum of its parts by a practical example.
Oh, that's Shakib. Okay.
Yeah, that is Shakib. Sorry.
Shakib, he's from the same company, so he's asking tricky questions. Synergy, whole is greater than the part. There are a lot of examples actually. On a serious note, um, if I break down, so customer journey itself is an example where the whole is greater than each part. Okay, to give an example in my own context of my own business context, it has always helped our client when we try to design and as well as do this, think of the strategy, create a good strategic plan, and then design and also create an app and deliver in the hands of customer. That whole is much better than we designing and then customer developing it through some other agency. Those 2 plus 2, they don't work because there are two independent pieces, right? So that exchange, because of the fact that there was a time when in software development I can speak, I have also practiced industrial design, but of late I don't know if the process has changed. But software development process has changed significantly. In software development, the activities were sequential for the most part. You do phase 1, then move to phase 2, then move to phase 3, and so on. Okay. Now they are not sequential, they are concurrent. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, they happen, there's a huge overlap. That's also a very good example of the whole is greater than parts. Because here, move from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, you are seeing them as distinct phases. By the time you are in phase 4, you realize a problem in phase 1 which you cannot correct. Okay. Whereas when you're doing concurrently, it is more expensive, but you can so quickly learn, and that what you can deliver and ship is much better than what you do the other way around. Shakib, did I answer your question?
Yes, Hari, thank you so much. And that is what I wanted to bring into this discussion. That is why I asked that.
Yeah, I know you are asking in the interest of others.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
But it was a very good question.
Yeah.
So the next question we have is, what is a good tool to do remote user testing for mobile applications where you would like to see the screen as well as the user's reaction?
Remote, good tool to do remote user testing where you would like to see the screen as well as user reaction. We have done this. In fact, we have some images on our website also of this. So even when essentially you will use a good old web camera and have 2 cameras, one behind the user, you will do shoulder surfing from that camera. User is using a mobile phone, and one in the front side. So we have done this not just now. Right now we are saying remote testing, but even before, when we work with multinational companies and we are testing Indian users, while we are physically there next to the users, our clients are still sitting elsewhere, and they are going through this remote these videos that are being captured remotely. So yeah, it's a simple, like a simple setup that you put. And uh, for otherwise, what is a good tool to do remote user testing for a mobile app? Yeah, it's a camera and the screen. If you are able to capture eye tracking from the screen, users have to allow that. You cannot do it randomly. Or if you have heat map generator, then also again you want to see users emotion, so you need to capture it through a remote camera.
The next question we have is, how do you constantly keep yourself updated with the rapidity of changes around?
Yes, the intention to keep updated is important. Then you will do it. It is sometimes I also feel ridiculous because there is so much to learn. Right? I am probably in the center of the Dunning Kruger. I know what I don't know. So there is always that. There's so much to learn. So yeah, it's little overwhelming at some time, but you should have the intention. And number 2, accept that learning is the only way you will move forward. The moment you say that I have enough, need not learn enough, I did not learn anymore, that is where you will stop. Life does not go on from there. So yeah, you dedicate time. What I do is data, for instance. I start learning a lot about data 2 years back. Okay, and I've made a little bit every day, 10-15 minutes focused on data. And what do? I actually follow Twitter feeds on data. There is so much I learn following different libraries. There are great data scientists who I follow on Twitter, and I read their articles and all that, and I learn so much. And of course, I also experiment. I use certain free to use data platforms, Google Data Studio. I use Tableau. We have licenses. We use that. But try your hands. But generally, as a process, if I have to tell, learning happens when there is information that is taken, but that's only one part of learning. There is reflection, which means you're trying to apply that theoretically to some problem, which is what we have as a structure in our internship program. Reflection. And the third one is action. Then you actually apply it. You conceptualize that and you actually apply it. That means you try to do it, create it, prototype it, or whatever. And finally is the part where there is silence, retrospect. Just don't do anything, think about it. And it's a cycle, keeps going on and on like that. Hope I was,
Yeah.
is it clear? Is that
Yeah, it is
understandable?
clear. Can you just suggest some things like you do to learn, like some portals or some things you like?
Some kind of portals. I actually don't see, I don't learn for certifications. So usually Udemy, Coursera and all that, I don't go at all. uh, I haven't needed certification until now, but I don't know, I might need in the future, then I will try to go there. But otherwise my learning is very practical, is based on practicality. So I follow the same cycle: understand, grasp information and concepts, then reflect on that and see how I can apply it to my challenge, then actually apply it to my challenge, and then look back. Is there a better way of doing it? Did I do enough? Those kind of questions. Uh, and then circle that back. Okay, for example, in the last 1 week, I learned Google Data Studio. I used it 2 years back. I used it to make very stupid dashboards. But there was recently a challenge in the company that client professional needed. Earlier, I used to use it for myself. Clients needed, and they wanted to see what kind of value we can add to Data Studio. So I just went ahead and learned it. Went to forums, read about it, found out some hacks, and then tried it myself. Failed, but finally, I think by Monday I was able to create a dashboard on Data Studio that I think I am satisfied with.
I think that answers the question and the question that was coming ahead. So the next question we have now is, speaking of research solely, how much importance would you give in understanding human motivation, emotions, role of neurotransmitters, cognitive biases, and so on, while understanding human behavior?
Oh, that's a very complicated question. Cognitive bias, you mean cognitive bias of your users? Is that the question?
Yes. So how
How
much
much?
importance would you give in understanding
Hmm.
humans, basically, their mindset and their motivation, their emotions?
A lot of importance, because for the most part, what we are creating is for the future, not for today or not for yesterday. We are creating for a future scenario. So it's the user motivation, or some kind of user behavior understanding is what tells us what is going to be the probable future, right? Otherwise, if you focus on just transactional part or user actions or just what user says, that may not give you enough understanding of what is the future state. So yes, a lot of stress goes on.
Okay, and the next question we have is, in relation to capturing customer data, are there any other approaches to segmenting customers other than bucketing customers based on assumptions, stereotypes in different age groups?
Other than bucketing customers based on assumptions, stereotypes, and what do you reckon? We should go with the 80-20 principle, assuming the behavior. No, don't do that. You should not go with the assumption. In fact, customer experience and and capturing the customer data and bucketing them, it's going to be very, very important. So the richness of what you create will be direct. It can be directly correlated with how well you are actually doing this particular bit. Okay. So if you actually follow some standard principles over here, or go with some assumptions, what you create also will end up being that. I'll give you a tangible, probably a tactical example for this. Okay. If you, for example, a typical way banking companies try to see a user life cycle is by their life stage, what they call as life stage. Okay. If you are looking at a customer and saying that, oh, 18 to 21, they will be in education. 21 to 24, they will be in their first job. 24 to 28, they'll be dating and they'll have more financial freedom. You bucket it like that. But this is a conventional knowledge that everyone knows. So every bank will go after customers with the same products and same solutions, resulting in lack of differentiation and customers getting irritated with all those pesky calls. But how would you do it differently, right? If you actually did it differently, you will probably be coming up with different kinds of products and solutions. Okay. If you look at it from user traits perspective, there is a very good possibility somebody is in the age group of 24 and 28, but he is an art lover. Okay. Or somebody is in age group of 24 and 28, not one person, customer, when you say segment, a segment of users, but they are passionate about cars. Okay. So then you will actually think of solutioning differently. Otherwise, you'll go to customers with undifferentiated same products and services.
And we have the next question. What should be the next step after doing user testing and noting down the pain points of the customers?
You will improve your product. So again, depending on the outcome, you will either improve it and then push it to the market, or you will actually push it to the market, but the learnings from the user testing will inform your next sprint. You will say that, okay, I'm going to improve it. Next 3 months, these are the problems I'll solve.
Okay, I think the next question that we have is, how can we legitimize our secondary data in times like these when doing primary research is impossible and secondary data is the only source for insights apart from a retrospective approach on our own experiences in the past?
No, primary research is not impossible. We are doing it. Even today, we are doing it. In fact, Disha, you also did, right?
Yeah.
Primary research, it is possible. There are certain kinds of research methodologies which are not possible, especially that involve deep in-person meetings. And I still hope that it is a temporary phase. Maybe it will last few more months. So it's going to be still possible in a career of say 30 years. How does it matter 1 year what is happening, right? But secondary data, now coming to that, the reliability of secondary data, that is always there, whether you are able to do primary research or not. Secondary research usually is something that you will first do to either filter down or to funnel down your primary research sample size, right? Or to have awareness about the subject or to create hypothesis. So at best, looking at open sources or looking at knowledge from books or libraries will give you hypothesis. Do not take them as facts. Okay. And there are no facts. There is nothing called a fact in the world. I think, I mean, it's too philosophical, but a fact is essentially a frame that is put on us. Okay. I can actually show you one data point and people will interpret the same thing differently. If the data point was a fact, universal fact, the only universal fact is all of us will die someday. But otherwise, and that someday is not known, there are such universal facts. But anything else, right? Anything that you get, any research, any secondary data you get, it is all left to the interpretation. So what is more important is how do you understand that fact and what you are going to do with that and put out in the market. That is going to be important.
Okay. Because I am glad you mentioned that the facts are not there. I mean, That's a very different approach. I don't think so anyone would have mentioned it so far. And a few of us are asking, can you share the mental health research project?
Oh yes, mental health. It was not research project, but
Okay.
student, because of you know what, during this period of last 3-4 months, and along with pandemic, a lot of things happened. Okay, Black Lives Matter suddenly became popular subject. So some students worked on what can governments do, what kind of research methods government should use if Black lives really mattered. Okay, and in another cohort, actually students related research methods to Bollywood, research methods to Mahabharata, which is an epic uh, mythological story. But these are also such very important connections. So coming to that topic, just give me a minute. I think I found it.
I could share the link with them, the LinkedIn link you have of these students, as well as your project link.
Yeah, yeah. Just give me a sec. I'll find that
Okay. Okay.
presentation and then I'll share the link as well.
Okay. Thank you.
You can ask any other question in the meantime.
Yeah, so we have a lot of questions coming up.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't want to make you wait.
Okay, so what we have, the next question is there any way I can contribute towards user testing of research phase free of cost? Because on my current job, I'm not getting enough opportunity for research.
User testing free of cost. Yeah, is there any way I could contribute to user testing free of cost? Actually, you can, if you are interested, you can also become a test subject. Try that out once. There are a lot of platforms like SurveyMonkey or whatever, which there are tree testing platforms also, where they will give you a challenge and you need to solve that as a user. So you become a test subject. But otherwise also, yes, as a if you are asking me from think design perspective, I do not know if there is anything going on right now which is in the user testing phase. Only then we can think of that. And also what happens is a lot of projects come with very strict confidentiality guidelines. So I don't know if it allows for that. But if there's anything, I will let you know. I don't know who wrote that. Who was that?
That was Imran.
Okay.
And then the next question we have is, the next two questions are very interesting. What checkboxes do you look at before taking up a project?
What? Sorry, what? Checkboxes?
What checkboxes do you look at before taking up a project? Means, what do you consider? What are the factors important for you before you take up a project?
The okay, some of them are very obvious. There needs to be some kind of a commercial value to what we are working on. But very importantly, what is very important is leverage. I really value that word leverage. Okay, so and it goes not just with the kind of projects we pick. It goes in the strategy discussions we have. Also, when we talk about data and all that, is the client able to leverage us? Okay, if I don't get that feeling, right, that they can leverage us, then it is a wasted effort for us as well as for the client, unfortunately. So that's why leverage is very important. Similarly, data, when I speak about data, that I have a source of truth from data, I can give an insight. But if you cannot act upon that insight is just a information. It is like sitting on a coffee table and reading news articles about government and criticizing it. There's nothing much you are doing anywhere there, right? So that also is leverage. I will give the kind of information or insight that you can act upon. Otherwise, it's unimportant. Similarly, for me, that is very important. Is the client able to, has the capability to leverage? Okay, I saw some WhatsApp message. I was still looking for that presentation. I think somebody is helping me on WhatsApp. Please go ahead, share that presentation. I think I shared it with the team.
The next question that we have is, yeah, how do you manage so much data and emails? Please give me tips to organize them. And then we have something similar only. How do you manage your schedule between work and family? How are you so productive any time of the day?
Yeah. How do you manage the time? Is that what the question?
Yeah, so it was mainly time management, data management, organizing, and managing your day.
it's a little crazy, but also with time, no, with age, certain things will ease out. Like I am at a different stage of life. I'm 44. I have a 11-year-old kid. So a lot of things are sorted out. I mean, I have little more time than probably uh, people of your age, maybe, because I have. I mean, for me, entertainment is not a dire need. I can wait until Saturday, and even if I don't watch a movie for 3-4 weeks, I'm okay. I really don't care because that phase is over. There was a time when if I didn't go to a movie on Friday evening, I would, that week is wasted for me, right? So at that age, you should do that. It's a meaningless life if you didn't watch a movie or didn't eat out at that time. I've crossed that phase already, so I have a little more time at my disposal for learning. But at the same time, you should. One more thing is, I think you guys who are much younger than me will grasp things faster because you don't have baggage. Knowledge, a lot of times, is baggage. It's a burden. Okay, it will. You will probably see things with certain filters when you don't have to. You might tend to overcomplicate things. But in your case, a lot of concepts that come to you, you can pick up very fast. But yeah, that's a very interesting question. Too much of too much of knowledge is not a problem. Too much of information is a problem. If you have so much of things to grasp, so you avoid certain things. Like I said, I avoid unnecessary movies also that I watch for a purpose. No, I like
Movies also.
yeah, I like movies that have some meaning. There's some learning from that.
Okay.
So you don't watch Bollywood at all.
Bollywood, some movies I do, but I watch it for the for understanding, for seeing it critically. See, I watched this movie. What is it? Amitabh Bachchan and Tapsi Pannu. That was the recent one on Netflix. Hmm?
Think.
No. It's the one where he is the attorney and she is a.
Oh no, there's another one.
Badla.
Badla. Yeah. I watched Badla. I watched Telugu version of Badla. I watched Spanish version of Badla.
Oh. Wow.
To compare all three of them. So that was trying to compare and contrast how one influenced the other and why Telugu is so different from the other two and what is the cultural context and all that. So that gives me, that's entertainment for me. Everyone has a different way of looking at it. Just 1 second. I think, yes, see, I found it. Thanks. So it's from Ishita. She worked on this is a weekly assignment. Can you all see it?
Yeah.
5 ways to help someone out today in depression, right? And these are the 5 research methods. So these are some certain fixed research methods that we talk about on our website. So there is a specific assignment given to the students. They took that and they wrote this. I can share this on our LinkedIn pages. So if anyone, and Disha, I will share this with you
Yeah.
also. You can share it with the group. Right? Then behavioral, sorry, I need to tuck this aside. Yeah, one-to-one interview, having one-to-one interview, role reversal, which is very innovative to apply this in this context. Can you look at it from the lens of the person who has mental health issues? Character profile or persona, and empathy in action. Then yeah, these are 5, and I think there are a couple of more students who worked on that. This is what I remember on top of my mind. So yeah, a lot can be done by designers even in this space.
Then the question we have next is, how should I pitch myself to you so you can hire me?
How should I pitch myself? It doesn't take much. If there is a opening right now and we like the portfolio and all that, we'll hire you. But I'm not the one who takes hiring decisions, because that's it's essentially spread across by different teams. Where there's a requirement, they will float to HR, and then HR will float it on different portals, and that's the process we follow. I don't have much influence on hiring decisions. All I can do is I can review a portfolio and recommend. The decision is taken by the people who are hiring. But you don't have to pitch. I don't. One thing is, from the lens of investors, I always say that you have to prepare a elevator pitch. But I myself don't evaluate people like that. I think people are more than 30 seconds or 90 seconds. There is much more to understand. Personally.
Okay. Then the next question that we have is one of the participants, Simran, has graduated from industrial design and wanted to share one of her research and small design project for pediatric ward doctors. Since after the feedback of doctors, she is really looking forward for feedback and support to take it forward. So can she share it with you?
Yeah, sure. You can email it to me.
Then the next question that we have is, I think you have touched upon these topics, but how does one validate the market research obtained on the internet? I mean, the data is insufficient. So what are the best possible ways of extrapolating user quantitative research?
You have to correlate quantitative or secondary research as well as primary. That is how you will be able to validate data. Okay, that's the right way to do it. So how do you do that is, when you take secondary research, between secondary research and primary research, you should have one phase which is hypothesis. Take secondary research, form your questions or hypothesis, and validate through primary research. It is as simple as that.
Okay. Then the rest of the questions, I don't think so they matter. Like, what was your favorite movie? And does the workload decrease as a CEO? Does it decrease as a CEO?
No, it increases. It increases because your responsibility is increased. Responsibility is more. Workload, but again, it's how you look at it. It almost becomes intuitive. Certain things you can think of them while you're taking a shower. You don't have to really sit and do it. So somebody also asked, what is your day-to-day job? Essentially, doing screens, I no more do it. I don't have time to do it, and I will not have that kind of attention span also. I cannot sit for 2-3 hours and focus on one screen and crack it. But I can delegate work and tell teams whether they are doing and that's more efficient use of time, because then I can essentially, what I look at is that if I have been given some talent and some role, and people have placed some trust and some money on me, can I use the same time to create a bigger impact? That means you are going broader, not just deeper. Okay? But there is nothing right or wrong. There are some people who would like to love the idea of craft. Right? They'll just go deep and deeper, which is also fine. There are both kinds of designers. So I belong more at that broader category. If I can actually influence the right decisions and the right work being done across 50 projects at the same time, I would actually love to do that, because then I can create as much more impact.
I think that's it, Tari. Thank you so much. I think you had clarified a lot of questions that we had. And I'm pretty sure like we have started getting feedbacks also. A lot of them are your fans already. They have already asked twice or thrice to share your LinkedIn emails and the profile.
Sure, you have my email ID and my LinkedIn profile as well, right? And this presentation of that, about that research and mental health, that I will share. But anyway, watch out our LinkedIn page. There are two LinkedIn pages. One is Think Design's LinkedIn page, and other one is Intern from Home. In both, we are regularly posting work that students have done. Extremely good, meaningful, and very, very useful work. You never know what is useful for you in your career as a startup founder or as an employee working in some company. So just take that and freely use it. The purpose of that entire program was to create knowledge for everyone's consumption.
Okay. And do you have anything, last thoughts or something that you want to share with us?
Yeah, the only thing that I go by is, please work hard. There is no substitute to that. Everything can be replaced. Working hard is very important. So do as much hard work as possible, and you will also have fun along the way.
Okay, guys. So I think that's it. We are wrapping up. You have Any more questions? You
Oh,
can forward it.
yeah. Harshit this side. Hi, Hari.
Hi, Harshit. Yeah.
I have two questions. I think so. I joined a little late. I love this session. बहुत अच्छे sites थे. So like I'm still in my third year pursuing my UI UX. I have two questions. Since I've been doing some freelancing or internships वगैरह simultaneously, I recently exposed to pitches और ये सब चीजें, which is conversion rate और ये वगैरह, कि आपका design part अच्छा है, but how will you convince your सामने क्लाइंट को कि ये डिजाइन अच्छा होगा, और आपने कई सोर्सेज बताए भी कि ये सेकेंडरी सोर्सेज वगैरह हैं, बट आई डिडंट गेट मच इनसाइट्स ऑन ये पिच वाला कंसेप्ट इंटरनेट पे. हमें यूएक्स का बहुत कुछ मिल रहा है, डिजाइन एलिमेंट मिल रहा है, बट उसको वैलिडेट कैसे करें पिच के साथ. तो काफियों ने मुझे काफी चीजें बोली, टूल्स कि प्रूफ ऑफ कंसेप्ट हो सकता है, कन्वर्जन रेट्स हो सकते हैं, एसईओ के टूल्स हो सकते हैं, बट
do you mean investor pitch? Do you mean investor pitch?
Yes.
You want to pitch to investors, right?
Yes.
So the one very, very important thing for investor pitch, what investors look for is, I invest X amount, what is the value I get, right? So that value you should be able to show through your product. And this is a very generic thing that for any pitch, whether it's an investor pitch or a pitch to your customers or your clients, if you're a consultant to your clients, the value is not what you see in it. The value is what the customer has to see in it. So you have to always wear their shoes and present it in a way that they understand value. So your pitch should talk about that, but that they should see through in your product. So if you're creating a product and you're talking about conversion rates and all that, are you able to show enough organic growth? I also talked today about lifetime value. If you have 100 customers paying you 1 crore each, your value is 100 crores. But if you have 200,000 customers paying 0 rupee each, right, then your value is still 0. You are only losing money, right? There are all these things that investors look for: value, scale, sustainability of scale. Is it just a temporary thing? Today I also showed you about that Google Trends, right? That mental health is just a small spike. It is not a sustainable trend yet. So they will look for all that. Those are the things you need to be able to showcase. Okay. Hope I was able to answer.
Yeah. So my second question is how to put a price tag on your designs.
The price that you put is the impact or is the impact it creates for your client. That is how you have to price it. That is why I said, when somebody was asking what do you look for in a project, I say leverage, right? So you will price it based on the impact it will create for the client. It's again from the customer point of view. Okay. If you are designing a logo, and if revamping brand identity is an impact of 600 crores, you can easily charge 20-30 crores for just that logo, right? If you are able to create that impact. Okay? It's all based on that.
Yeah, and nice talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, I need to rush into my next meeting. So
thank you so much, Hari.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. Thank you. Hope you had a good time.
On behalf of the MyClabs team, I mean, the last insight itself was so powerful that, I was left wondering. I mean, wow, I mean, just like that. So thank you so much, and we look forward to collaborating with you.
Sure, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.